Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to again be in conversation with my dear friend, Pam Gregory, who's an extraordinary astrologer, author, and light worker. I was thinking about it this morning, Pam. In so many ways, I feel like you are a lighthouse in the stormy times, holding the energy of love and light for so many. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Well, you're picking it up across the Atlantic, Heather. And, thank you for your extraordinary, loving, caring, generous friendship. I honor it greatly. And you are a brilliant astrologer with a big perspective on the shift of the ages, a brilliant shaman. And I just want to, honor you for being in my life. Thank you so much. I really respect the connection between us. So bless you.
Thank you. And this is particularly profound that we get to be in conversation today, the day of the new moon, where we're going to be moving into this cardinal grand cross, the shift of the lunar nodes from Scorpio and Taurus to Libra and Aries. So let's talk. I mean, we both feel this is such a profound shift and is energizing the profound Pluto square with the lunar nodes that will be active through the rest of this year. So talk a little bit about your take on all of this.
Yeah. One thing, Heather, which really just occurred to me in the last sort of couple of days, which is, I think, an interesting perspective on. I don't think because this is in Cancer, this is a new moon in Cancer, and Cancer we know is the sign most connected to motherhood. And therefore, it's connected to children. And Cancer is the sign, as we know, that wants to nurture and protect the vulnerable, those in need, both your own children, but I think children more widely, and also anyone who's sort of vulnerable in society. And the sun and moon, the new moon, are being opposed by Pluto. And when we have an opposition, it often indicates things that are coming at us from the outside. And Pluto, particularly in the last few degrees of Capricorn, we know is power or big government or invisible leaders or invisible power. And because the South Node is just about still in Scorpio and Pluto rules that, both Pluto and the South Node in Scorpio are linked to things that are underground, underhand, often sexual, often criminal, big money, hidden money, all of that sort of thing. And I think it's so interesting that in the last week or so, a very high profile movie, and I won't mention the name of it, has come out all about children and links to things that are underhand, underground, etc., that is gaining a lot of publicity. And I'm wondering whether this new moon, because it's a new beginning, is going to start to unravel a thread that people will feel they need to protect children, perhaps in a wider, bigger way than they have before. Am I making sense?
Oh, totally making sense. And it's interesting because I think as we're in this final day of the South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus, that South Node in Scorpio has been very much about bringing to the surface what's been in the unconscious or what's been in the shadows. And it's interesting that you would talk about that, Pam, because so many of us, and I know you're one that also feels this way, that the children coming in this time are carrying the higher frequencies and the energies of the new paradigms that we're moving into. So if you think that, and I do believe in these final degrees of Pluto being in Capricorn, it is the deconstruction of those power over paradigms. And yet, those who are clinging to the old paradigms, I think, are very in tune with the shifts that are happening. Yeah. And trying to have some control or to disrupt what's unfolding. And that's interesting that you're talking about children, in that they're holding the energies of the next generation, of the world we're moving into. Yeah. So they are not only needing protection, But I feel like a huge theme right now is that they need to be understood and supported in their differentness and not pressured to fit into the conventional paradigms that are being deconstructed.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's really Aquarius energy, isn't it? That we're each unique parts of, of a network. And it's also the North Node in Aries, isn't it? Your sense of individuality.
Yeah, sovereignty of the self.
Absolutely, inner power and a very distinct sense of self, which I think Aries energy has. I often think because I have 3 planets in Aries, and in a way it's a very simple energy of just, I know who I am. There's no fuss, there's no big deal, there's no necessarily plunging into therapy. It's just, yep, this is who I am. It can be almost childlike, it's in its simplicity. And I think Aries lives in the present moment quite often because there's a strong sense of physicality and in the now. I've noticed that with Aries energy. So this will be very helpful for us, I think, to develop that sense of inner power, inner centeredness, inner authority that both you and I feel, is coming through strongly now.
What's interesting in terms of that too is, as you know, I'm very interested in the precessional cycle. And from my perspective, we've gotten out of balance in the last 4,000 to 5,000 years because we got caught in a distorted understanding of the age of Aries, which was approximately 2000 BC up to this current era. So part of my sense of Pluto squaring the lunar nodes in Libra and Aries for the remainder of this year is how can we individually and collectively work the distortions of that paradigm to come back into its deeper meaning and its beautiful expression. The interesting thing with the ages is the first, each astrological age is about 2,000 years. The first 1,000 years is really an expression of, in the case of the age of Aries, that energy of Mars. But then the sub-age, the second half of the age, is meant to integrate the sign that is the polarity.
Wow.
So the second half of the age of Aries, we were meant to integrate Libra and the energy of Venus to have that self-expression, but come back into right relationship with each other. And we didn't do that. We became disconnected, caught in the power over the shadow side of Aries and Mars. And I feel like this is a chance to revisit those themes and release those destructive paradigms coming out of the age of Aries that we've clung to for 4,000 years, to find, as you're saying, the beautiful archetypal expression of Aries in balance with Libra.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, talk about big picture. That is absolutely massive. And, that's beautifully said, because again, we've expressed, or I think certainly in recent years, we've expressed probably the shadow side of Libra in terms of, compliance and don't rock the boat and suppress your individuality, suppress your sense of sovereignty for many people, but getting back into right balance, not only with each other and honoring the other in relationship, but also with nature and the earth, which is so much what the Kuiper Belt objects are talking about. This sense of Pono, P-O-N-O, this sense of right relationship and respect for nature. So it works both with people and with the earth.
Yes, that's so beautiful, because Haumea is conjunct the South Node now and is so much about, she's a creation deity. She's about being in tune with nature and birthing new ways of being. So I feel like she's guiding us in how to tap into that deeper meaning of Libra, which is about being in right harmony, right balance with all of life.
Yeah.
So it's such a time for being in an accelerated process of change and reintegrating those energies of the sacred feminine with the sacred masculine, and and that balance of Libra and Aries in that sense also.
Yeah, ruled by Mars and Venus. Yeah, absolutely, beautifully said. And when, one of the times, and I've spoken about it in other videos, one of the times we had this before historically was during the 1780s and 90s, when 1789 was the key thing with the French Revolution, and Pluto was then in Aquarius, squaring the nodal axis in, then I think the North Node was in Scorpio and the South Node in Taurus, but nevertheless, that's what was operating. And that was an incredibly accelerated time of change, because there'd been a dominant patriarchy with the monarchies across Europe until the peasants in this they couldn't tolerate the inequality anymore. And that's what we're seeing, I think, right across many countries now, this massive exaggerated inequality. So they stormed the Bastille, took down the monarchy, and France became a republic. But after that, because that wasn't an exact square, it was the beginning of a T-square happening to the nodal axis. And over the following months and years, a middle class was born in Europe. Democracy was born in Europe. The Assemblée Nationale, I can't remember quite what it was called, I've quoted it in other videos, but it was the foundational document for democracy across Europe. Small enterprises began, small farms began, and power very definitely shifted to the people. The tax structure changed. From Capricorn to Aquarius, the tax structure changed, so there were more benefits going to the poorer people than the aristocracy and the monarchies of old. So it was a monumental shift in social and political structure over the coming years. And this is what we're going to see, I think, particularly because the US is still in its Pluto return. Because Pluto comes back within minutes to the so-called natal 1776 position of the US in October, when it stations. It's just within a whisker of that natal Pluto. So they're very, very big waves of this whole Pluto square, the nodal axis, for the US in particular. Massive rebirth.
Yes, and I think what you're talking about that's so key is that this will need to shift our financial systems as well, and as well as our political systems. And it's interesting that not only is Haumea conjunct the South Node and will be through September, but Eris, I always call her Eris Xena, is conjunct the North Node now and will be through, I think, until January.
Yeah.
So I think she's not only supporting us in stepping into that Aries energy in the way that we're in the unique expression of our own sense of self and our own gifts, but I think she's also showing us that these new forms that we're meant to move into, as the current systems are deconstructing, are going to be radically different from anything we've ever known.
Yes.
That we are moving into, as you're saying, forms that will be more egalitarian, will be more about community, more about collaboration. But I think we're capable of moving into new forms that we can't even quite dream of yet.
Yeah, I really think that's true, because the energy is so different. I think it's absolutely spot on. And it's interesting, just to pick up on a couple of points there, Heather, because we're well aware that Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008, and there's often a kind of crisis around that archetype, isn't there? And of course, everybody knows September we had the financial crisis, and that was never fully resolved. Did the bankers get punished? Well, not very much at all. The inequality and that very solid big business, big money government power structure has never been fully challenged. Well, now it's got to be challenged before Pluto fully exits Capricorn, I would think. So it's got to kind of finish that cycle around our financial structures. And what you were saying is so interesting about Eris Xena as well, because with Chiron in Aries, I mean, everybody has Chiron somewhere, and I see it as the original wound where you're wounded. And in Aries, that is the kind of I am. I'm wounded in the I am. I'm wounded in my sense of identity for whatever reason, according to my soul's choice. I had a sense of, do I have a right to exist? And normally that's turned into leadership in later life, but that's where it's wounded in the I am. And Eris was a sense of social exclusion. She wasn't invited to the wedding in the myth. So for both of them, there's a sense of woundedness and social exclusion, and I don't fit. And with the North Node moving back over them over the next 18 months, in fact, just in the next, I think, 6 months or so, all of those issues around woundedness and exclusion and abandonment and not fitting in society are going to be very much brought to the fore to be healed for those of us who feel, we're kind of weird and don't fit.
I totally agree that, for me, transiting Chiron in particular is beaming healing energy into whatever sign it's in, whatever aspect it's in with our charts. So yes, the Chiron wound in Aries is that wound to the sense of self. And I think Chiron, transiting Chiron now in Aries, is saying it's time to heal.
Yeah.
And we all who are awakening and open to it. It's extraordinary for me as a clinical psychologist to see the rapid, accelerated healing that people are going through right now. What we used to, and I spent my own long-term period in therapy working on my issues. And I remember just kind of slogging through the different ways of what I needed to work out. And now it feels like the issues are coming into our conscious awareness, are opening for healing in a very accelerated way. And I do believe the cosmic energies and solar energies that are impacting us are supporting us in that, so that there's a profound level of healing happening energetically as well as emotionally. But it's so helping us to integrate these new ways of being and to heal what needs to heal, to be more fully in that creative expression of who we each uniquely are.
Yeah, beautiful, because we're moving into air, which is lighter. And there's, with Pluto moving through those last few degrees of Capricorn, it's like a purging or a cleansing, and it may even be ancestral. It may not even be ours, but, all of that trauma has to come to the fore to be purged and healed and cleansed in order that we can have a lighter footprint as we move forwards into air. And that's immensely exciting. But yeah, you're seeing as a clinical psychologist, and I'm just seeing in people all around me that it's happening at dizzying speed, and it's hard to keep up with because it's hitting our physicality as well, all kinds of physical symptoms. It's kind of, hang on, we can't keep up with this. But it's also very exciting because my understanding is that when this kind of upgrade, and you will know this much better than I do, Heather, that when the upgrade was happening in Sirius, it took several hundred years. But for us, this is happening in a very concentrated few years. And this is a unique evolutionary opportunity because we're doing it again in physicality.
Well, and I know you mentioned in one of your recent videos, and I've talked about this also, that we're in this evolutionary leap from Homo sapiens to Homo luminous ones, beings of light. So we are becoming more and more energy beings, which means we do need to let go of that dense energy of what's been weighing us down or what's unresolved. And I think that's part of why we're in such an accelerated healing process. But then it opens up this capacity for not only higher consciousness, but the expansion of our consciousness to be galactic beings again, to be really aware of what we're capable of with our consciousness that we've been constricted from fully experiencing across these last 5,000 years, which the Hindus call the Kali Yuga, the time of forgetting. So I think that there's so much expansion that's happening at the same time as we're healing and letting go of the pain from the past to move into these. And to me, part of what Arizina is about is moving in these radical new directions and daring to step off the beaten track to follow your own unique path.
Yeah, and the Aries North Node is really going to, be who are you now? If you look back to the last cycle of, what was it, December 2004 to June 2006, who were you then? And who have you now become and are about to step into as a new version of self, an upgraded version of self? And I think it's quite helpful to look at the last time the North Node was in that same position and see how far you've come in your unique expression, the unique essence of you, Aries. And what you were talking about with that sense of expansion, Heather, I think is so true. And of course, coming down the track not far away, we've got that beautiful Jupiter-Uranus connection in April next year. That's an expansion of the higher mind, expansion of the connection to the galactic as well. I think that's going to be amazing to open up our consciousness.
And it's expanding our consciousness. And I think it's such a time of heightened creativity also. I mean, you and I, before we got on the video, we're talking about just these amazing new technologies in healing that are coming out. And I think there's so many other technologies around energy sources and other ways that we can be working that are supporting these new paradigms that we're moving into. But it is such an incredibly creative time that we're in the midst of the chaos of the deconstruction of the old forms. There's also this increasing openness to amazing creativity.
Yeah, I really agree. And it's very interesting, isn't it, that at the moment we have an operational, although wide, trine between Pluto and Uranus. But as we move into 2026 to 2028, we have 5 exact trines. And if we look back historically, I think it was back in the 1700s, it was an incredible time of creative blossoming, innovation, renaissance, art, music. And I think it's going to be, yes, much more technological this time because of Pluto being in Aquarius, but it's going to come fast. And if, therefore, you can keep your focus and your attention and your vision on that excitement and what's coming down the track for humanity versus the nightly news and the demolition and the, the really big scary things, you can get on this momentum of, wow, this is an amazing time that we're in. You get out of the fear into the excitement.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, because I do believe Pluto is that planet of alchemy, of what needs to die in order to birth and empower the true gold of what's emerging. And so I think, my sense, and I'd love to get your intuitive sense of this, but I think as we're experiencing this Pluto square the lunar nodes through the end of the year, we're going to see the gifts of that, but we're also going to see the shadow side of that I do think that it will be empowering, not empowering, but there will be a way in which those who are trying to cling to power will try even harder. It is the last gasp of those old patriarchal power over paradigms. So I think some of the turbulence that we may experience the end of this year into 2024 before we reach that threshold point at the end of 2024 when Pluto moves fully into Aquarius will be the final effort, the final struggle to cling to those old paradigms. But as you're saying, I think it's so important that we not attach to that and not get caught in fear around that. Because to me, what's so profound is, I was saying to a friend the other day, the astrology almost feels like the universe is giving us these neon lights and signs saying, this is what's unfolding. Trust it. Those old forms are dying. And these new forms are being birthed in such a powerful way. Trust that. And there's so much support and guidance in these upcoming transits, helping us through this death rebirth, that we are being carried and guided and supported by these energies far beyond ourselves.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely spot on. I agree with all of that. And I think because we've lived in such density with very long-term foundational structures of governments and systems and education and the law courts and all of that, that we're moving into air, so we're moving into something that's much more invisible. We're being asked to trust energy, we're being asked to trust frequency, and like a fool in the tower, step off that cliff edge, just trust the invisible, hitch your star to a wagon. So it is a huge act of trust, but nevertheless, that's where the energy is going. And I absolutely agree with you. I've used the analogy of the theatre, and the scenery was initially coming adrift, and now it's just kind of crashing louder and louder, and the actors are talking more and more loudly, so you don't kind of notice that the whole theatre's collapsing. And I absolutely agree. It will get louder, it will get more chaotic, it will get crazier. And that's why it's important to stay together with people you love, people you trust, family of frequency, to give you that support that we are birthing something absolutely magnificent. At the same time, we don't have to wait until the old is absolutely gone to dust. We're creating the new right now. And it's going to be very interesting, even the second half of July, because that's when that T-square of Pluto to the nodal axis is tightest. On the 22nd, 25th, 28th of July, it's exact. It's absolutely exact. And so this second half of the month is going to be immensely powerful, I think, in terms of what unfolds in terms of power.
It's extraordinary because the cardinal grand cross, at least, today it will be the sun and moon opposite Pluto. Yeah. But then the sun will remain in that opposition with Pluto through the 22nd. And then we go into that tight T-square. So it's as if this portal, I feel like it's an incredibly powerful portal time for transformation.
Yeah, I agree.
And to me, part of the profound meaning, I had never thought of the layer of it that you were sharing before about mothers and children with the sun and moon in Cancer. But I also see that as the importance of our holding ourselves and each other with compassion, Cancer. Yeah. And knowing also that Cancer related to the moon is that energy of the great goddess, the great mother. So how do we honor that we're held by these energies beyond ourselves to be holding each other in compassion as we move through this powerful portal time? And what you said, I think, is so important. The new forms are already being birthed.
Yeah.
And you've talked about this a number of times. It's almost like there's a parallel reality that's happening.
Absolutely, 100%.
And so where we put our attention and where we put our energy is what we're supporting and empowering. So the more we can be living in those new paradigms of communities that are developing, that are disregarding the current structures that are deconstructing, and like the People's Health Alliance or the Food and Farm Alliance that's unfolding there in the UK and growing worldwide, we can be in our own communities creating these new realities.
Yeah, and the networks are connecting globally, as you say, which is what is so exciting. And I think that is so true, Heather. I often say, don't give energy to what you don't want and then blame it for giving you a hard time, which is what we've actually done.
I like that. That's good.
And we've done that all of our lives, and we're still, many of us doing that. We watch the nightly news and go, we give a lot of energy to that and think, isn't the world terrible? And I still have people in my life who I love dearly who are still caught in that drama of, gosh, the world's in a terrible state. We've got World War III, and XYZ is going to do XYZ and blow up the world. And I think, well, I've had a great weekend. We were setting up a whole new workshop about a different kind of healing with new technologies. I was with friends who I didn't have to explain myself to or cut bits of myself off. You could be yourself, and we are all creating, every single one of us in a group I'm involved in, as you know, Heather, we're creating from our different unique spark of that Aries North Node blending with the Aquarius energy of what can we create that's amazing? What can we create that's beautiful, loving, compassionate? Because if we're not in compassion, and I think that was so beautifully said, Heather, if we're not in compassion, we can easily slip into judgment and polarity. I'm
Yes.
right, you're wrong.
Yes.
Got to come to my side, left, right, black, white, Republican, Democrat. Whereas compassion supersedes that. It operates at a higher level of being, because there's no, this is Characlo.
Yes. Yes. Beautifully said.
Divine neutrality, benevolent neutrality that goes beyond the polarity and the division and the judgment. And that's where we've got to be, because that kind of separation, division has gone on for eons of the hamster wheel. And we've got to get beyond it energetically and feel that internally in order to create it externally in the world.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think, as you're also, basically saying, there's fear or there's love.
Yeah.
And when we get caught in the chaos and caught in the drama and turmoil and trauma of what's unfolding on the world stage, then we get caught in fear. It lowers our frequency, it lowers our consciousness. And then we're colluding with those paradigms, even if we're not actively believing in them or supporting them. We're fueling them with our fear.
100%.
So the more in whatever we're doing in our daily lives, we can come from that place of love and higher consciousness. We can be acting as these transits are trying to guide us into right relationship. Then we are emanating that not only in our local environment, but I truly believe that we then are seeding that in the collective consciousness.
I couldn't agree more, Heather, 100%, because if we feel that fear, we get a physical and energetic contraction, but we are quantum entangling in a quantum set. We are quantum entangling to the timeline you absolutely don't want. And I'll often say in the videos, just by sitting at home for free and feeling love and peace, you are energetically feeding the higher timeline. People, some people watch me and think, that woman's living in La La Land. Doesn't she ever watch the news? Doesn't she know what's going on? For heaven's sake, what kind of silver spoon was she born into? And an utterly privileged life where, nothing has disturbed her. Well, as you well know, nothing could be further from the truth. But we have to create those feelings of love and peace internally to create them externally. We absolutely have to. So, and I don't want to talk about the dark stuff and doom and gloom, and neither do you, because we just keep on recreating it.
Yes.
That's the old model. That's how 3D operates.
Well, and I love Thich Nhat Hanh's words that you can't stop the war in the world if you don't stop the war in your heart. And I'm with you on that. I'm often saying to people, the highest form of social activism you can do right now is to be in these energies of higher consciousness and love and hold that, ground that here and seed that in the collective, because it creates this morphogenic field that can transform the collective consciousness. And that's the profound shift that I think we're in right now. And the Pluto squaring the nodes, I really see as a karmic choice point, that individually and collectively, it's time to transform and deconstruct those old paradigms and move in these new directions. So we each have that choice. And as we make that choice, we impact the collective. We can't wait for the change to happen outside of us. It has to happen inside of us.
100%, Heather. I couldn't agree more. And isn't it interesting with this shift of Pluto into Aquarius? It's all about, you think of the two jaggedy lines in the glyph. It's all about energy and frequency. And we are learning to become masters of that by sitting at home on your sofa, closing your eyes, dropping into your heart and watching your breath. That is the first step in our mastery of energy and frequency, because that will change your energy state. It will change your blood viscosity. It'll change many biomarkers in your physiology simply by doing that for a few moments. And there's lots of evidence for that. You can find that all over the place. So if we can become masters of our own energy and frequency, we start to change the quantum wave structure, particularly if we can come together in a mass meditation or even online. we are creating this energetic tsunami of love, peace, joy, and compassion. And that's where we are headed, I think. And, I'm sure people out there think I'm absolutely crackers, but I passionately believe that's where we're headed. And I believe it in my bones, because there isn't another solution. We change it by frequency, as you say, because we're changing the morphogenic field. We don't change it by dropping more bombs on people.
Well, this is how you're a lighthouse in these stormy times, because you're really holding, and I think part of what you're describing, Pam, is you're holding that wisdom of what we're moving into with this evolutionary leap, but you're also holding that awareness that the ancient wisdom that we once knew is guiding us in how we can move into that reconnection with everything being energy, everything being frequency. Those zigzag lines are one of the oldest images in prehistory.
Wow.
You see them on ancient pottery dating back tens of thousands of years. And
Wow.
It was symbolic both of the waters of life, but also the energies of life. And I firmly believe, you and I've talked a lot about these Kuiper Belt objects that are connected to these indigenous ancient creation deities. I think some of what will support us in this transition time is remembering and reconnecting with that ancient wisdom. And I truly believe the indigenous peoples who never forgot that ancient wisdom and understanding that everything is energy and everything is interconnected are helping us in those of us who've been enculturated in the modern mindset to remember what we've forgotten and come back into that connection with energy again.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And so many of these Kuiper Belt objects, as you say, have that indigenous creator, God or goddess connection. And that connection with nature and the earth comes back to things that are very simple in a way. When you think of the complexity of modern life and the fact that our attention has been very much pulled outwards to the media, to develop a short attention span on smartphones and computers, whereas, and it's very complicated out there because there's so much that's going wrong. Whereas if you drop into your heart, your breath with bare feet on the earth, all of a sudden life becomes very simple if you've got an inward focus and you're not shedding power. You're turning inwards to your power, not giving it away to whomever. So I think that's beautifully said. And you have so much knowledge, Heather, with your shamanic studies. You have so much knowledge of indigenous tribes, which I think is going to help to really lead people in this quantum leap we're going to make. So you're going to be shining even brighter, I think, with all of that knowledge you're going to bring forwards.
Well, I'm hoping to interview some people that are really connected to that ancient wisdom who can be guides to us and how to come back into remembrance with that. But I think what's also profound about that ancient wisdom is, part of this, the sadness of the disconnection that we've moved into the last 4,000 or 5,000 years is this overemphasis on the sense of separation, overemphasis on scientific materialism. So there's either been a denial of spirituality or it's transcendent, it's out there, it's not right here. And the ancient indigenous understanding is that we're here in this embodied physical reality, but the energy of the sacred, of spirit, is in us, is all around us. And that's what we can tap into. And that is what gives us life force, life energy, vitality, and that understanding of what it means to live in right harmony with all of life. And I think Ibrahim Karim's work in biogeometry, that's tapping into that ancient wisdom, but now integrating it now with modern science. There's so many ways in which we're remembering that ancient wisdom to bring it forward in this time that I think is also going to change our connection to technology. Because the more we understand our capacity with our consciousness and get out of that scientific materialism perspective, the more I think we're going to be opening to these extraordinary ways of healing, of communicating, of being on the planet that are about consciousness.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, in the interim, we're seeing all around us, and you and I have talked about them a lot. These external healing technologies that are very exciting, but ultimately we will develop an inner spiritual technology, just like the indigenous people have never lost, and they have such a sense of being interconnected to everything in the cosmos, everything in the universe. They're interconnected, as you know better than I do. And so that's something we absolutely have lost in our modern day, that mind was everything and dominated over matter, and nature was just something to be pillaged and exploited. I think at its best, we are going to turn that around completely and go back to the sacred and a reverence for nature, as you say, that is going to be magical. Absolutely magical, and we're going to feel almost that childlike awe and wonder, you know, and that's going to be our excitement, not buying a new Ferrari. You know, my excitement this morning was seeing dragonflies at the stream, throwing sticks in the stream for my neighbour's dog. It's a stream that's very well known for dragonflies, and you just think, wow, you know, this, just sitting there in silence, nobody around for miles, thinking, wow, this is utterly magical, witnessing nature. And it's that that's going to give us excitement rather than stuff, material stuff.
Well, you know, I think that is so profound. And the Sabian symbol for this new moon is about opening to the mystery.
Yes.
And, you know, in my video about this new moon, I quoted Abraham Joshua Heschel's quote that awe is the beginning of wisdom.
I heard that. I thought that was fabulous.
So I think that, as you were saying earlier, with Chiron and Aries healing our sense of self, when we feel wounded and inadequate and don't have that connected sense of self, then we need to fill that void with stuff or addictions or something to help us feel intact. But as we come back into that sense of communion with the sacred all around us, that sense of awe, that sense of wonder, not only do we reclaim a more solid sense of self, but deeper sense of connection and awareness that we're a part not only of these communities that we're forming with each other that are part of the Aquarian age, but we're a part of the community of all of the life around us.
Yeah. And you will know this better than I do, Heather, but my understanding with indigenous people is that they each have a very clear sense of self, but within the tribe or within the community. They don't have the mental illness to the degree that we do, and the dissociation and the addictions. It's only when they're sort of interfered with by other things that they fall into that. But if they're left pure and intact to operate as they always have, my understanding is that they just thrive as unique pieces of the puzzle within that tribe. Is that the case?
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting that, you know, in some of the studies that I've done of tribes in Africa, psychosis is evoked for them when there's a sense of rupture in relationship.
Wow.
And my doctoral dissertation was talking to acutely psychotic people, inpatient, and the ongoing theme, you know, I would listen to their their experiences, and they were, you know, psychotic and delusional at the time that I was interviewing them. But if you listen to what the metaphors and the themes were for these people, it was heartbreaking, because it was so much about feeling unloved, feeling disconnected, feeling rejected, feeling abandoned. So our modern culture's overemphasis on separation and individuation has led to such harm to our sense of security in ourselves, in our relationships, and in our relationships with nature also. Because I think that's another profound part of Indigenous culture is by the time you come to adolescence, you let go of the dependence on the biological father and mother and others in the village and open to your own unique sense of self. You're on your vision quest and you honor that now you are in connection with your spirit guides, with Mother Earth, with Father Sky, that you're a part of that oneness. So I think that is part of what we're reclaiming again.
It's just so beautiful. And what you were saying about those themes in all the psychotic conversations with psychotic people you had, you were really speaking the symbolism of Chiron and Erisina in Aries, that North Node in Aries is going to be moving across and helping to heal. You know, it was so clear, the woundedness, the separation, the not being part of, the excluded from the wedding, no clear sense of self, like a polo mint with a hole in the middle. Everybody else is great, but not me. You know, that's what's going to be healed. So, anyways, there's some very clear themes here. And I think a lot that we can feel excited about, particularly if we can tune into those Kuiper belt objects, which have so much to promise in terms of those indigenous connections, right relationship, harmony, magic, but they also have with them a sense of understanding of quantum physics in a way, of how we manifest using energy and vibration. I mean, with Kwawa, you had to sing and dance and get yourself into a state of joy before you set your intention to manifest. You don't do it from being glum. You do it from joy.
We're out of tune.
Or out of tune, yeah, absolutely. You do it from joy, you know, your highest frequency. And it was always singing and dancing in community.
Yeah.
That was a big part of it too. And I think Ixion has much to teach us, because I know it's got a, you know, not that great a negative expression about Ixion being kind of spun off into eternity on a burning wheel because he didn't distinguish himself that well. But his higher expression was following your bliss by finding simplicity and joy, finding your own unique bliss.
Well, and as you know, you and I've talked about this, I also think that conjunction therein in Capricorn is also about Ixion's, you know, shadow side being the sense of separate self, acting out of greed, acting out of revenge, acting out of whatever my impulse is in the moment. I don't care how it impacts anyone else. And Quawar, who's saying, no, we create by coming back into harmony with each other. I love that as Quawar was creating the plants, the animals, the sun, the moon, they all joined in the song, all joined in the harmony, which I think, as you're saying, I mean, you're talking about the excitement of this time. How extraordinary is it to come back into harmony, to come back into that sense of being a part of the symphony of the cosmos? That we're no longer alone, but we can be a part of this dance, this song with each other, with the cosmos, to be co-creating something together.
Yeah, and that's where the excitement lies, doesn't it? And whether you find your tribe online or whether you find them in person, the fact that you are creating something beautiful and new is very exciting. And if you put your total attention and focus on that rather than the misery, then life is exciting. And, you know, again, my neighbors must think I'm absolutely crackers because I'm always happy. Whereas, you know, they are much less so because they're watching the news and feeling very glum about it. But it's all down to your focus and attention. And that Pluto square the Nodal Axis is really, as you say, putting that in neon lights right now. Where is your focus and attention? Because know that invisible energetic action of where you focused on joy, beauty, compassion, peace, etc., gratitude, is the beginning of creating something magnificent. It's learning how powerful the invisible is, which we've never had to interact with in such a clear way before.
Beautifully said. And another facet of that, I think, is we can open to that joy and gratitude when we are also working in a positive sense that Pluto opposition with the sun and the moon right now, which one of the things that I've always felt about Cancer is being a cardinal water sign. Cancer is like the surface of the sea.
Yeah.
That we need to hold with compassion whatever we're feeling, because those of us who are sensitive and empathic are feeling the turbulence in the world, but we can feel it and then let it flow, let it go, and know that that Pluto energy is the deeper transformation that's unfolding, that is bringing the new life into form from the depths that will transform our experience of this outer reality. But we can hold with compassion what we feel, but not get mired in the turbulence of this time, but hold that perspective of the larger transformation that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And not try and feel that, that we are arrogant enough to manage it, because it's happening anyway. This evolutionary process is happening anyway. So it's almost surrendering also to what is. The old is crumbling. It can be jolly noisy and not pretty, but it's inevitable, because that's what the astrology is saying. That's what the life was. That's where the energy is going. So just surrender to that process and create from your heart. And that's really what we have to do, and we'll be okay. And we'll magnetize people to us on the same frequency who want to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And call them into harmony with us,
Yeah. Yeah.
Be spreading that song, that dance of joy and harmony and co-creation.
Yeah. And it's interesting also, Heather, what you were saying about, this sense of separation, etc., with the psychotic people, because I understand that with indigenous tribes, very often when a new baby is born, the whole village sings a song for that baby to welcome it in. So it becomes part of not just a family, but part of an entire community from that day of birth. I mean, how far have we moved from that?
Well, and what's beautiful in what you're saying is it fits with that shamanic understanding that we each have a soul song. So a lot of times in those indigenous cultures, they would be tuning in together. What is the soul song for this new child, this new being? And once you know your soul song, if you get out of balance, you get ill or you get stressed, you remember that song and you come back into harmony again. You come back into balance again. And it's profound. I actually got in touch with my own soul song when I was going through a very, very dark time in my life. And I would just keep singing. It was a wordless tune, but I would just keep singing it. And it was like remembering home, recovering that sense of home inside and coming back into balance, even in the midst of the external turbulence. So I think as we each can, and that's part of, I think, this North Node in Aries, how can we each remember our soul song and bring it into harmony with each other?
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And that's such a blend, isn't it, of Aries Aquarius, developing a clearer sense of your purpose, your essence, etc. But there, and in doing that, making a bigger contribution to the community.
But to me, some of what's so profound about the Aquarian sense of community is it is about diversity. It is about that each of us is a unique fractal of cosmic consciousness, that if we're not expressing our unique gifts, they're missing from the whole. So we need to be in our own uniqueness, but in collaboration with each other, Aquarius.
Yes, it fits together perfectly, because it appears superficially to be a contradiction. One is about community, the other is about individuality, but no, absolutely not. The way you've expressed it is perfect. And I notice in my own group, as the weeks and months go by, each person has a clearer and clearer sense of their own role in this period of accelerated evolution. And it's beautiful to watch, because it's thrilling, because it helps people to have this stronger sense of self, and power, not in an assertive way, but just I know who I am. I know why I've birthed on this earth, what I'm here to do with this particular incarnation. And they are supported by other members of the group in pursuing that particular unique path.
Isn't that exhilarating? Isn't that so beautiful to see that kind of empowerment? And then you experience, and to me, Elizabeth Sahtouris, the evolution biologist, talks so much about how we humans are needing to make this leap into more maturity as a species, to remember our interdependence and our interconnectedness and the importance of biodiversity. So what you're describing is what nature already understands, that when you have that exquisite diversity, it fosters this way in which you're supporting each other in your strengths, in your gifts, in what can be created together.
And it's so interesting. Apparently, Dr. Zach Bush talks about this, but when we come together, when we hug each other, we are actually swapping bacteria, which boosts your microbiome. When we're isolated, as we were kept in lockdown, your microbiome depletes because you're not enriching it with different bacteria. And so lockdown really backfired in a way, because these groups would not have got together across the world without lockdown. There would have been no need. We would have just kept on same old, comfort zone. But there was such a powerful need for human connection after we'd been deprived of it, particularly if you lived on your own, that we couldn't wait to get together and hug and laugh and swap bacteria happily.
It's beautiful. You're right. It became a catalyst, actually, for this accelerated new way of being in connection with each other.
And that's why I think with Pluto moving through these last few degrees of Capricorn, whatever is attempted to sellotape up the scenery in the theatre will backfire, because the scenery's gone now. It's crumbling. There's nothing we can do foundationally to kind of get that scenery back up again. It is
I love that image. That's a great image. It's analogous to, I loved Star Trek. And
right.
Do you remember the holodeck?
Yeah.
So it's like we're in a holodeck. And this particular scenario, this scene is not working, and we just stop the holodeck and create a new reality. And I think that's part of what we're doing.
And I think what's sort of helpful for people, if we also remind them there is not just one reality. It appears so if we watch nightly news, that there's only this one thing and nothing else. And that isn't true. As we know, there are many, many different realities. And probably we're changing timelines every few moments as we shift in our frequency through the day. And so therefore it may be a reality, but it doesn't have to be yours. You can choose a very different reality. You can create, because we're creating from the invisible all the time. We've always done it, but weren't aware of it.
Oh, beautifully said. I'm really glad you wove that in, Pam, because I think that whole sense of the multiplicity of the realities is critical, but also the timeline that we're in is very fluid.
Yeah.
And that part of, from my perspective, what these transits are supporting us in is how to work consciously in this fluid time to be clear about what we're energizing for the timeline that can unfold in what is this larger collective reality. So we all have more capacity to be co-creators of that than we may feel we do. And again, I think that's the importance of reclaiming our understanding of energy and of consciousness.
Yeah, fabulous. And I think it will only be in retrospect, Heather, that we look back and realize what an important role we're currently playing. We're just in the thick of it right now, but we've often referred to the role we're playing as the pioneers of New Earth, the builders of New Earth, and the Z's with Lee Harris refer to us, I think, as the bridge people.
Yes.
That's the term, the bridge people between the old paradigm and the new. and that's our role right now. And I'm sure we'll live to see some wonderful times because it's moving so quickly. I think my personal view is by even early 2026, we're going to be in a radically different world by then. Saturn moving out of Pisces into Aries. We've got some very strong astrology, as we know, around about that time, and these 5 exact trines between Uranus and Pluto start to happen. And I think that's a big jump of a new episode at that time.
Yes, well, we need to be in a longer conversation about that at some point, because you and I were talking about these shifts that are coming up in the next few years, and 2027 is another critical transition time. And when you start tracking the transits for that, it's extraordinary. So this really can be an exhilarating, exciting time on the planet when we can hold that larger perspective of what's unfolding and remember what we're capable of as we come back into that remembrance of who we truly are and how we can work with our consciousness and with energy in these higher ways.
Yeah, we're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. If you feel you're going on a doom and gloom dip, you're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. Keep that as a running mantra. Just flick it. If you're in gloom and doom, just flick it to something like that to kind of bring you back up.
Well, that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you.
Loved it, Heather, as always. Loved it. I never know where our conversations are going to go. We don't prep beforehand, but yeah, I really loved it. So thank you.
Lots
Always
of love
to share.
And lots of love to all of you.
Yeah, lots of love, everyone. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye for now.
Bye.